What's going on, everyone? Coach Aaron here, back in with another video to help you dominate the platform. Today we're going to go over the squat walkout so you can lift the most weights on the platform. So let's get started. Alrighty everyone, welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another video. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to go over everything regarding the squat walkout so you can be as efficient as possible with your walkout and be able to lift the most weights possible. So I've been hounding on people for this for years about how people just kind of like stumble out of the rack, take 5 or 6 steps, go right into their squat. There's no tightness. Maybe the bar has been moving around on their back as you're trying to set up, and it's just not very efficient. So whenever someone posts up a squat video online and asks for technique review or anything like that, the first thing I do is take a look and see if they included in the video their actual setup, unrack, and walkout before they execute their squat, since all that sets you up for that squat. And oftentimes you'll see that people aren't doing that as well as they can. So the first thing I always tell them is, hey, you need to improve your unrack and your walkout. All right, so I figured I'd put a video together today going over the unrack and the walkout to set you up for that PR squat. We're not going to go over bar position on the back or grip position or anything like that. So if that's what you're looking for, this video is not for you. We're going to go over just how to unrack and how many steps to take and how to take those steps to set up before you start your squat. All right, and the reason for this, as I've already said before, is that you want to be as efficient as possible with your walkout. The reason being is that kind of maintains that tightness. You don't want to be losing your upper back tightness from stumbling around during your walkout. You also don't want the bar to be moving up or down your back or side to side because you are stumbling out and not staying tight. If you don't have collars or clips on the weights on the bar, it's possible that the weights will shift around too, and then the weights might be offset or it might even slide off and the bar tip over like I've seen before. So that becomes another important factor. If you're someone who doesn't have access to clips, you want to be very efficient and stable. And it's possible that this will even reduce the risk of injury, since if you are taking steps all over the place and you slip or something like that, or maybe you tweak your foot a certain way or knee a certain way, then it could cause you to like slip or roll your ankle or hurt your knee or something like that. So you want to be deliberate with your steps. The first question you might have is, well, how many steps should I take, Aaron? And the typical number is 2 steps or 3 steps. All right. For 2 steps, it is a little bit difficult depending on the rack that you have and how wide you need to set up. It's not effective for everyone. In a typical power rack where you can't move the uprights, oftentimes with the 2-step walkout, you end up hitting the side. When you take your first step back into the side, you end up hitting the weights on the one side of the rack. If you're using a competition rack and you're able to put the uprights in and still be able to grip the bar where you want, then you won't have any issues at all and you'll be able to do the 2-step, no problem. But for most people, if you're watching a competition, especially a higher level one like nationals or worlds, you'll see most people will use a 3-step walkout because that first step clears you from the rack, from the uprights. So regardless of whether you have the uprights out or in or how wide they are, that first step will clear you out, and then you do the 2 steps to set up your stance. All right, so an overview of the 3-step walkout before we break it up into parts is you'll set up underneath the bar, wherever bar position you use and grip and everything. You'll unrack the bar, wait for it to stabilize. First step clears the rack. Second step sets up your stance with 1 foot. Third step sets up your stance with the other foot. Then you wait a second, stabilize the weight again, and then you get the squat command, and then you'll start your squat. Key points for the unrack. First, you want your feet to be narrow, okay? So you want to be similar to a conventional deadlift, and you want your feet to be underneath your hips. That way, when you're pressing down, you're pushing force straight down to the ground. You don't want to be out wider, pushing out to the sides, and you don't want to start with a wider stance and then sit up more narrow for your squat stance. You want to be narrow, feet underneath you, pressing straight down into the ground to unrack, and then you'll be taking your steps to go wider to set up your squat stance. Also, your feet should be the same, so you shouldn't have one that's staggered in front of the other or staggered behind the other one. You see this sometimes as people want to kind of like unrack and walk back at the same time, so they'll kind of stagger it, but then that puts more weight and more force on one leg than the other one, so then you're getting one leg doing more work, and like I said, you are trying to unrack and walk back at the same time, and you want to kind of break up those steps and do one at a time. As far as where your feet should be positioned, you want to try and get that midfoot directly under the bar. You don't want the feet in front of the bar, and you don't want your feet behind the bar. In front of the bar, you may fall backwards, and behind the bar, you may go up into the uprights. So you want the midfoot directly underneath the bar so that you're pressing straight down, hips are coming through and you're standing up. You can kind of think of it as that last bit of a conventional deadlift, or maybe the top of a leg press, where you're just trying to use your legs to push the hips through and stand the bar up when your feet are directly underneath the bar. You don't want to be doing some kind of weird good morning or some other movement like that where you're using maybe too much back, or some kind of lunge, like I said, with the staggered stance. Alright, so when we're going into our unrack, into our first step, like I said, when you unrack it, you want to take a second and let the weight settle at the top. Especially if you're very aggressive with your unrack, the bar and the weights might bounce a little bit. So take a little second, let the bar settle, take a breath if you need to, and then you'll take your first step. When you take your first step, it's going to be a small step straight back. It doesn't matter if it's your right foot or your left foot, but you want it to be straight back and a small step. The straight back is going to clear the rack, since you are moving straight back from the rack rather than sideways into the rack. Okay, and the small step should be somewhere around the length of your foot, or maybe even slightly smaller. We don't want to be taking big steps, wasting energy, putting ourselves in a compromised position, and we don't need to go that far back from the rack. Depending on what kind of rack you're using, you might only have so much space that you can go back. The safeties are also going to cover only so much space. You don't want to be going so far back that you're going to be outside the safeties, and then the competition of platform is only so long and you don't want to be going off the platform. Okay, so about 1 foot length, or maybe even 3/4 of the foot. Step 2 is going to set up that foot, whichever foot is now that hasn't moved yet. So in this case, it'll be this one. You want to bring it to the side and set up your stance width for that foot. It can be lined up with the first step, or maybe even slightly further back to then clear the rest of the rack and get you a little bit further away, exactly where you want. But you don't want to be doing excessive, where it's another foot length, because now you are 2 feet away from the starting position. So the first foot is going to be about 1 foot length, and then the second one is about the same, or maybe just slightly further back, setting up that stance. From there, you're going to go into step number 3, which is then setting up that first foot that you moved into where you want that stance to be. So then you set that one up equal with the other foot, and then you are done. Once you are here, if you have it down pat, then you are ready to go. You just wait there to get the squat command, and then you do your squat. If for some reason you're a little bit off, like for example your toes are pointed a little bit more forward than you like, then you can just make little minor adjustments and kind of move your feet out a little bit wider, or a little bit more toes out to get exactly where you want, and then you're ready to go. As you are transitioning from whatever walkout you're doing to this 3-step method, you want to be focusing on progression, not perfection. So if you don't get it down perfect the very first time, don't worry about it. Okay, make those little minor adjustments, get it to where you are comfortable to do your squat, and then do your squat, whether it's the sets in the gym or in a competition. Then the next set, try and make that adjustment. See if you can get it down without having to do the minor adjustments, just getting it right the first time. Over time, when you're practicing this, you're going to get better and better. It's going to feel more natural, it's going to feel more comfortable, and you're going to get that third step down perfect. You're going to have the toe angles down perfect, and then that's just going to become your new walkout and your new setup that's going to be exactly where you want it to be when you're squatting. And as a side note, there may be some small imbalances. So you may have 1 foot that's naturally in front of the other one, or you might have 1 foot that's toed out more than the other one, and that is okay. Again, we're not going for perfection. Everyone is built a little bit differently. We have different past injuries. You might have one side that's tighter than the other one. You have one side that's stronger than the other one. So you may naturally always have 1 foot that's maybe like half an inch in front of the other one, or maybe 1 foot that's maybe like 5 degrees or 2 degrees toed out more than the other one. It's not a big deal. If you're executing your stance every time the same and it's something you feel comfortable with and strong with, there's some little imbalances, and you know you've had past injury like that, then don't worry about it. If you're starting to see more and more of a change of like, okay, this session is way different than the other one, then you may want to look into those things, like maybe you are tighter on one side from a long training block, and maybe you need to focus on maybe warming up more, loosening up certain muscles more, so that you can get that more balanced stance. As far as breathing is concerned, it's up to you how you want to do it. If you want to hold your breath the entire time, or you want to take some breaths during it. But oftentimes people will hold their breath in order to do the unrack, and then as the weight is settling, you may let your air out, take a new breath, do your 3-step walkout, and then let your air out again. And then when you get the squat command, take a new breath, and then you hold that breath and execute your squat. And then once you're at the top of the squat, you let the air out again. But if you want, and if you feel better and you feel tighter holding your breath the whole time, then you can just take a big breath of air, do your unrack, let it settle, do your 3 steps, let it settle, and then when you get your squat command, you could always let that air out and then take a new breath for the actual squat. If you want to learn more about the squat walkout and see an actual example and more about the technical faults in the squat that people often make, then you can check out the S&S Barbell YouTube channel. Coach Joa has a video 15 minutes long breaking down all the technical faults in the squat and how to fix them. This is part of their S&S University lectures. So they were doing kind of a in-gym lecture and then hands-on work, and they recorded it and decided to start putting these videos out on YouTube for free for you guys. So you can go over there, you can check out his 15-minute lecture on the squat, going over, like I said, he's starting off with the walkout, but then he goes over other things that you can look into. So I'll put the link to that in the description below. So now you watch this one, you can go check out that one and see Coach Joe's thoughts on the squat walkout and other errors in the squat. Other than that, you can always do that YouTube stuff, like the video, share with a friend that you think needs help with their squat walkout, and then subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos like this. Comment below what other topics you'd like for me to discuss. Hope you're having a great day, and I'll see you next time.